I want you to just imagine for a second a moment when your primary life plan, like your option A, just completely vanishes.
It's a heavy thought.
Yeah, it really is. Just picture this. You're sitting by a pool on this beautiful vacation in Mexico. You're with your spouse, celebrating a friend's birthday.
Right.
You're playing Settlers of Catan on your iPads. The sun is shining. You drift off for a quick nap. And then, well, you wake up, you look around, and your spouse just isn't there.
Which is confusing, but you don't panic right away.
Exactly. You don't panic. But a little while later, you find them on the floor of the gym, and they're gone. A sudden cardiac arrhythmia. In just a fraction of a second, your entire reality, your future, your option A, is completely erased.
Yeah, and how do you even begin to wake up the next morning?
Right. It's a terrifying thought experiment.
Yeah.
But the thing is, for millions of people, it's not an experiment at all. It is just the sudden, violent reality of their lives.
It really is.
And that profound, unimaginable tragedy is actually the foundation for our deep dive today. We're pulling from the book Option B, which was written by Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg, who, by the way, lived that exact scenario we just described when she lost her husband, Dave.
Yeah, along with Wharton psychologist Adam Grant.
Right. But the mission of this deep dive, it isn't just to talk about the nature of grief. I mean, we're looking at these sources as basically a masterclass in the actual mechanics of human resilience.
Because it's really about the biology and the psychology of surviving.
Totally. We're going to unpack how we survive the absolute worst things that can happen to us, how we can effectively support the people in our lives who are stuck in that void, and how we can actually build our resilience muscles before a tragedy even strikes.
Which is this crucial concept the authors call pre-traumatic growth.
Pre-traumatic growth. Love that. So whether you are currently navigating a massive life shift, or maybe trying to help a friend who is hurting, or you just want to be mentally prepared for those inevitable bumps in the road, we're going to arm you with the psychological tools you need.
It's so important.
So to start, we really have to look at the immediate aftermath of a crisis. When option A collapses, what is actually happening inside our brains?
Well, paradoxically, the brain's initial reaction is to completely sabotage your recovery.
Wait, really? Sabotage?
Yeah, I mean, psychologist Martin Seligman identified what he calls the 3 Ps that actually stunt emotional healing. The first of these is personalization.
Okay, what does that mean?
It's the overwhelming belief that we are somehow at fault. And Sheryl experienced this intensely. I mean, even after the autopsy proved Dave's death was a cardiac issue, she spent weeks scouring his medical records.
Like trying to find a clue or something?
Yeah, exactly. She questioned his diet. She wondered if she had missed some subtle symptom. And she was also constantly apologizing to her colleagues for crying at work, like she was taking on the burden of everyone else's comfort.
It just seems so irrational from the outside. I mean, why does the brain default to blaming itself when a random medical emergency happens?
Because it is a desperate search for control. You know, from an evolutionary standpoint, our brains just hate chaos.
Right. Chaos means danger.
Exactly. If a tragedy is just random, it means we are utterly vulnerable at all times. But if it's my fault, if I missed a symptom, then I have this illusion of control. It means I can prevent it from happening next time. It's basically a defense mechanism that misfires.
Huh. Listening to you describe this threat response, it almost sounds biological, like an autoimmune disease.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like just as an autoimmune disease tricks the body's immune system into attacking its own healthy cells, it sounds like personalization tricks the brain into attacking its own psychological recovery.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The brain's threat detection system goes into overdrive and just starts destroying the very mechanisms you need to heal.
Yeah.
And we actually see this in the other 2 Ps as well.
Okay, what are the other 2?
The second is pervasiveness, which is the belief that this single event will ruin absolutely all other areas of your life forever. And the third is permanence, the belief that the acute, suffocating pain you feel right now will just never end.
Yeah, I noticed in the sources that Sheryl actually had to consciously train herself to change her vocabulary, to fight that permanence.
Right. She had to reframe her thoughts.
She forced herself to stop using the words never and always, and she swapped them for sometimes and lately. So instead of saying, I will always feel this awful, she would say, I will sometimes feel this awful.
Which is so crucial because humans are notoriously terrible at a concept called effective forecasting.
Effective forecasting.
Yeah, we are fundamentally bad at predicting how we will feel in the future. We consistently overestimate how long negative events will ruin our happiness. I mean, studies show that college students who go through a breakup or professors who get denied tenure genuinely believe they will be miserable for years.
Is that also like an evolutionary glitch?
It is, yeah. Our brains evolved to prioritize current, immediate threats just to keep us alive. When you are in emotional pain, the brain projects that pain infinitely into the future, so you will take the threat seriously.
So it's trying to help, but it hurts.
Right. It blinds you to your own capacity to heal. We actually have a robust psychological immune system that kicks in to help us recover, but effective forecasting just prevents us from seeing it.
Wait, if our brain is actively blinding us to our own recovery, how do we help that psychological immune system do its job? Because the sources mention a piece of advice from Rabbi Nat Ezra, who told Sheryl to lean into the suck.
Yeah, it's a bold phrase.
It is. Basically, to accept that the suffering is inevitable, rather than developing meta-anxiety, which is, being anxious about the fact that you're anxious.
Right, compounding the pain.
But I have to stop here, because when I hear lean into the suck, my immediate worry is that this sounds a lot like toxic positivity. I mean, are we just telling grieving people to look on the bright side? Because that feels incredibly cheap.
It would be cheap, and you're totally right to flag that. Forced positivity actively backfires because it invalidates the person's lived reality.
So what's the alternative?
The antidote to the 3 Ps isn't ignoring the pain, it's grounding yourself in cold, hard facts. Adam Grant gave Sheryl this really shocking intervention when she was spiraling.
What did you do?
He told her to imagine a worst-case scenario. He said Dave could have had that exact same cardiac arrhythmia while driving your children in the car.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
It takes your breath away. But look at the mechanism of what Grant did there. It immediately sparked genuine, fact-based gratitude in Sheryl.
Because her kids were safe.
Exactly. It cut right through the permanence and the pervasiveness. She realized her kids were alive and safe. That is not forced positivity. That is a stark, jarring shift in perspective that anchors you back to reality when your brain is just trying to drag you into the abyss.
Okay, so we can rewire our internal response. But, I mean, we don't live in a vacuum. The moment you step outside your house, you have to deal with other people. And reading these sources, society is basically entirely inept at handling other people's trauma.
We are staggeringly bad at it. Psychologists refer to it as the mum effect.
The mum effect.
Yeah, it's the human tendency to avoid sharing or discussing bad news out of this misplaced fear that acknowledging the pain will somehow make it worse.
Oh, I've definitely seen that happen.
When Sheryl went back to work or to social events, people completely ignored her grief. They would make awkward small talk with her about the Golden State Warriors or the weather.
Just pretending nothing happened.
Right. She described feeling like an invisible ghost. People saw the giant elephant in the room, but they all pretended it was a mouse.
Because they were terrified. I mean, we are raised on the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated. So a well-meaning colleague thinks, well, if I were devastated, I wouldn't want people bringing it up and making me cry at work.
But the golden rule fails completely in trauma because it's inherently egocentric. It centers your preferences. What we actually need is the platinum rule of friendship.
Which is?
Treat others how they want to be treated. You have to take your cues from the person in distress, not your own discomfort.
But how do we know who is supposed to offer the comfort and who's allowed to fall apart? Because trauma ripples outward, right?
As it affects everyone around it.
The sources outline this incredibly practical framework by Susan Silk called ring theory, or the kvetching order.
I love this framework.
It's brilliant. Imagine drawing a circle with the grieving person right in the center. Then you draw larger concentric circles around them. The first outer ring is immediate family, the next ring is close friends, then colleagues, and so on. The rule of ring theory is simple. Comfort in, dump out.
It's an elegant system for emotional logistics. You offer comfort and support to anyone in a smaller circle than you, and you are only allowed to complain, seek support, or express your own feelings of helplessness to anyone in a larger circle than you.
So you're not dumping your stress on the grieving person.
You never, ever dump your own emotional baggage inward onto the people closer to the tragedy than you are.
And when we are facing inward, offering that comfort, we really have to talk about the phrases we use. I mean, we all default to, let me know if I can do anything.
Everyone says that.
But offering a grieving person anything is like handing a blank menu to someone who is starving and exhausted. It sounds generous, but it actually places the entire cognitive burden on them to figure out what they need formulate a plan, and then ask you for a favor.
Which a grieving person simply does not have the bandwidth to do.
Not at all.
The alternative is offering specific, actionable support. There's a brilliant example in the book. A colleague's son was in the hospital. A friend didn't text and ask, "Can I bring you food?" Instead, he texted from the hospital lobby and said, "What do you not want on a burger?"
Oh, that's so smart.
It gave the person dignity and a feeling of control, but completely removed the burden of planning.
It constrains the choices, which is great, but it raises a real anxiety for a lot of people. Like, how do we acknowledge someone's pain without feeling like we have to act like a trained therapist?
Well, you don't need a psychology degree to be a good friend. It's really just about naming the elephant in the room so the person knows they aren't invisible.
Just calling it out.
Yeah. The sources highlight Emily McDowell, a cancer survivor who was so isolated by people saying the wrong things that she created her own line of empathy cards.
Oh, I love this part.
One of her cards literally says, "I promise I won't tell you a story about my cousin's friend who died of lemons."
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
And it perfectly calls out that weird thing we do where we try to relate to someone's unique pain with totally unhelpful tangential anecdotes.
Right. Humor and bluntness can be profoundly comforting. Just acknowledging the reality removes the isolation of the mum effect. Sheryl actually started answering the standard, "How are you?" with, "I'm not fine, and it's nice to be honest about that."
Wow.
Just naming it gives everyone in the conversation permission to exhale.
So ring theory protects the person from the clumsy outside world, but what protects the person from themselves? Because when you are sitting alone in the center of that ring, your inner monologue has to be brutal.
It can be your worst enemy.
The next step in this resilience journey is doing the internal work of rebuilding your identity. And that requires a very specific tool, self-compassion.
And self-compassion is heavily misunderstood. To illustrate what it really looks like in practice, the sources share the story of Catherine Hoke.
Yeah, her story is intense.
It is. Catherine founded the Prison Entrepreneurship Program in Texas. It was a highly successful nonprofit that taught business and life skills to incarcerated men. She was winning awards, doing incredible work, changing lives. But then her personal life collapsed.
Her marriage ended, right?
Her marriage ended abruptly. Feeling isolated and deeply ashamed, she sought support from the wrong places, specifically from the graduates of her program who were now out of prison.
She crossed a massive ethical line.
She did. She made severe ethical boundary violations, having intimate relationships with more than one of her graduates.
Oh, wow.
It became a national scandal. She was banned from the prison system, forced to resign, and lost her entire career, her community, and her identity overnight. She was consumed by such intense shame that she even attempted suicide.
She'd spent her entire adult life giving second chances to ex-offenders, and suddenly she was the one who needed a second chance. I mean, how do you even begin to find self-compassion after something like that?
She found her way back through journaling, actually.
Really? Just writing?
Yeah, she used writing to systematically identify her self-limiting beliefs, thoughts, like, "I am ruined forever," or "I am fundamentally broken." And she consciously rewrote them into self-freeing beliefs like, "My worth isn't tied entirely to my past actions."
That's a powerful shift.
Over time, she built enough self-compassion to launch an entirely new organization, Defy Ventures, which went on to help thousands more former inmates.
The journaling aspect is fascinating to me because it's not just a nice self-care ritual. There is hard neurological science behind it.
Oh, absolutely.
Psychologist Jamie Pennebaker did this groundbreaking research where he had people write about their deepest traumas for just 15 minutes a day for 4 consecutive days.
And the results were wild.
Yeah. Initially, it was painful. Their blood pressure spiked.
Right.
But months later, those same people had significant emotional and physical health improvements. They literally had higher T-cell counts in their immune systems.
It's incredible.
How does putting pen to paper actually change your biology like that?
It really comes down to how the brain processes information. When trauma happens, it lives in the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain. It exists as chaotic, unstructured feeling.
Just pure emotion.
Right. But when you force yourself to write about it, you have to use language, syntax, and narrative structure that forces the trauma out of the emotional center and into the prefrontal cortex, the logical part of the brain. You are literally rewiring how the memory is stored, giving yourself power over it.
That makes so much sense.
And as you rebuild that sense of self, Adam Grant's research highlights another tool. He says we shouldn't just passively count our blessings. To rebuild self-confidence, we need to actively count our contributions.
Right, writing down 3 things you did well each day, even if it's just, I made a cup of tea or I actually focused during one meeting, it rebuilds the belief that you still have agency.
Oh.
But I have to admit, I struggle with this concept of self-compassion in Catherine Hoke's case. She did something objectively wrong. Doesn't self-compassion just let people off the hook? If I mess up that badly, shouldn't I feel terrible so I don't make the exact same mistake twice?
That is the crucial distinction we have to make, and it's where we confuse shame with guilt.
Okay, what's the difference?
Shame says, I am a bad person. When people feel shame, it attacks their identity. They shrink away, they hide, and statistically, they are far more likely to commit repeat offenses because they feel inherently worthless.
Because they think they can't change.
Right. Guilt, on the other hand, says, I did a bad thing. Guilt attacks the behavior, not the person. It motivates repair. It makes you want to fix the damage.
Ah, I see.
Self-compassion is what allows us to feel the guilt, to take full, unflinching responsibility for our actions without being completely crushed by the paralysis of shame.
That makes total sense. Shame is paralyzing. Guilt is mobilizing. So we survive the initial shock, we navigate our outer rings with the platinum rule, and we rebuild our internal identity without shame. The final question is, where does this leave us? Do we just go back to who we were before option A vanished?
No, you often become someone entirely new. This is the concept of post-traumatic growth, pioneered by psychologists Tedeschi and Calhoun.
Post-traumatic growth?
Yeah, they found that in the wake of trauma, people don't just bounce back to their baseline, they often bounce forward.
Bounce forward, I like that.
They identified 5 specific forms of this growth-finding personal strength: gaining a deeper appreciation for life, forming more intimate relationships, discovering more meaning, and seeing entirely new possibilities.
It makes me think of a forest fire.
How so?
Well, a forest fire is utterly devastating. It destroys everything in its path. But the burning of the dense canopy is the only thing that allows sunlight to finally hit the forest floor, which germinates seeds in the soil that could never have grown in the shade.
Oh, that's a beautiful metaphor.
Thanks. It's a beautiful concept, but if someone told me my tragedy of a growth opportunity while I was in the middle of it, I would be furious. Isn't it incredibly insensitive?
It is hugely insensitive if the timing is wrong. Adam Grant explicitly states in the book that he waited 4 full months before he ever uttered the phrase post-traumatic growth to Sheryl.
Okay, so you have to wait.
Yeah, it is absolutely not a platitude you throw at acute raw grief. It is a destination. You can only aim for it once the initial fog lifts and you realize you still have the agency to shape the life you have left.
And we see this profound, almost unfathomable growth in the story of Wafa, a Syrian refugee living in Istanbul. Her story in the sources is just devastating.
It really is heartbreaking.
Her husband was arrested in Syria and disappeared. Her 16-year-old son was killed playing soccer. She fled to Turkey, only to find out later that her 2-year-old grandson was killed by a sniper back in Syria. It is compounding loss upon loss. How does a human being wake up from that?
Through the mechanisms of flow and meaning, Wafa found a community center in Istanbul. She deepened her faith, and crucially, she found a profound sense of purpose in cooking.
Cooking.
Yeah, she started cooking traditional Syrian food for her sick neighbors. She told the authors, I will be healed through healing them. She is experiencing post-traumatic growth by taking the only things she has left, her culture and her capacity to care, and giving them to others. It grounds her in the present.
It is the ultimate act of defiance against the void. And part of that defiance is reclaiming happiness. But that is incredibly hard to do because of survivor guilt.
Right, feeling bad that you survived?
Exactly. Survivor guilt actively punishes us for joy. The sources describe Sheryl finally having a moment of pure happiness, dancing to earth, wind and fire at a friend's bat mitzvah, and immediately being slammed with intense guilt. Her brain essentially said, how dare you be happy when Dave is dead?
It's so common. But Dave's brother, Rob, actually gave her the psychological permission she needed to break that cycle.
What did he say?
He told her, all Dave ever wanted was to make you happy. Don't take that away from him. That sparked a massive shift.
Just a total reframe.
Sheryl realized she couldn't just wait for joy to return. She needed to actively take it back. She didn't hide the things she used to do with Dave. She took back the board game Catan, playing it with her kids. She took back playing Scrabble online, substituting Dave with his brother Rob.
They made it an active mantra, we take it back. And teaching that active reframing is so crucial for raising resilient kids, too. There is this amazing story about Tim Chambers, an award-winning painter who is 70% deaf and legally blind.
Which is a monumental hurdle for a visual artist.
Absolutely. But his resilience started when he was a kid. He was profoundly embarrassed because the other kids at school were constantly staring at his bulky hearing aid.
Kids can be cruel.
They can.
Yeah.
But his dad didn't just offer empty comfort or tell him to ignore them. He taught Tim how to reframe the embarrassment with humor.
How did you do that?
He told Tim that the next time kids stare, just press the hearing aid, pump your fist, and yell, "Yes, Cubs are up 2-1 in the ninth." He taught him to pretend he was listening to a live baseball game.
That's brilliant.
Right. It completely inverted the power dynamic.
That dad gave his son the tools to control how he was perceived. He taught him the core mechanism of resilience. You are not a passive victim of your circumstances. You are the author of your reactions.
So if we look at the whole picture of what option B requires of us, it's a complete shift in how we approach the darkest moments. We have to actively fight the brain's tendency toward the 3 Ps by grounding ourselves in facts.
Yep.
We have to banish the mum effect by acknowledging the elephant in the room and using the platinum rule. We use self-compassion to feel productive guilt instead of paralyzing shame. And ultimately, we take back joy, knowing that the burned-down forest can grow new seeds.
And the most important takeaway for anyone listening is that you do not have to wait for a tragedy to build this muscle. The concept of pre-traumatic growth happens on hundreds of forgettable ordinary Wednesdays. It happens when you consciously track your small daily contributions, when you practice self-compassion for making a minor mistake at work, and when you connect honestly with a friend who is struggling, rather than just making small talk.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. We talked about how our psychological immune system functions incredibly similarly to our physical immune system, right?
We did.
Well, we know that if we completely insulate our physical bodies from all germs, our immune system weakens and attacks itself. If that is true psychologically, does insulating ourselves from small, everyday discomforts like avoiding an awkward conversation with a grieving coworker or hiding from our own minor failures actually weaken our psychological antibodies?
That is a really provocative question.
Perhaps the best way to prepare for the day, option B becomes our reality, is to start willingly facing the small, uncomfortable elephants in the room in our lives today.